You were not born distracted. You were engineered that way. Right now, before you even finish reading this sentence, a system you cannot see is calculating the exact emotional frequency required to keep you scrolling. It knows your loneliness better than you do. It knows the precise moment your willpower breaks. It has been feeding you carefully designed stimuli since the morning you first touched a screen. And you called it entertainment. You called it connection. You called it freedom. That is the lie they fed you. The truth Machiavelli understood. The truth they have been breeding out of civilization for 3 generations is that desire is not yours. It never was. Every craving you feel, every restless need to check, to compare, to consume, has been manufactured inside a machine you never chose to enter. And the most terrifying part is not that the machine exists. The terrifying part is that you consented to it. You handed over the keys to your own mind and called it a free choice. There are 5 specific mechanisms through which the algorithm has colonized your desire. The 5th one will explain everything you thought was wrong with you that was never wrong with you at all. If you are not ready to hear this, close this. Go back to the feed. Go back to the crowd. But if you want to know how this works, if you want to see the architecture of your own captivity, stay. You were brainwashed to believe that the internet is a neutral tool, a library, a marketplace of ideas where the best information rises to the top. You were told that you are in control, that you choose what you watch, what you read, what you desire. The entire mythology of the digital age rests on this premise. The empowered individual, sovereign in his choices, navigating the information landscape with freedom and intention. This is not a mistake. This is engineering. The platforms were not built to serve you. They were built to extract from you. Every recommendation, every notification, every infinite scroll was designed by behavioral scientists whose singular mandate was not your flourishing, it was your engagement. And engagement, stripped of its euphemism, means compulsion. It means they have found the frequency at which your brain cannot stop. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." The algorithm understood this before Silicon Valley had a name. It does not love you. It does not want your happiness. It wants your attention, and it will use fear, outrage, jealousy, and longing as instruments to keep it. It fears nothing. And you have been trained to fear missing it. Robert Greene, in the 48 Laws of Power, Law 9. Win through your actions, never through argument. The platforms never argued with you. They never told you what to want. They simply showed you, over and over, a version of reality calibrated to your psychological profile, until your wanting aligned perfectly with their profit model. Not an argument, an architecture. I am going to show you exactly how this was done to you. But be warned, what you are about to understand cannot be unfelt. Phase 1. The algorithm did not steal your attention. It purchased your identity. Most people think the problem with social media is distraction. They think the fix is a screen time limit, a digital detox, a Monday morning promise to check their phone less. This is the thinking of a man who believes he has a splinter when he has a blade buried in his chest. The average man does not understand that the mechanism is not distraction. It is identity formation. Psychologists call this the concept of the extended self, a framework developed by researcher Russell Belk in 1988, which describes how humans incorporate external objects and media into their sense of self. The content you consume does not merely pass through you, it becomes you. The algorithm knows this. It feeds you a steady diet of identity-confirming content until your politics, your aesthetics, your desires, your fears, your entire architecture of selfhood has been constructed in a feed. Napoleon Bonaparte understood the power of controlling narrative and identity. When he took power, he did not simply seize land, he seized the story. He rewrote French history, redesigned the flag, rebuilt the institutions of meaning. He understood that the man who controls what people believe they are controls everything. The platforms are Napoleon, and your timeline is the new Napoleonic code. The cold action. Spend 72 hours consuming only content you deliberately and consciously chose before opening any platform. Books, lectures, documents, things you selected with your prefrontal cortex, not your dopamine system. Notice what changes in what you desire and how you speak about yourself. That discomfort is the shape of the mold they built around you. What happens when they do not just shape who you are, but who you are allowed to become? Phase 2. Desire is not spontaneous. It is engineered through social comparison, and the algorithm has a monopoly on the mirror. The psychological mechanism here is social comparison theory, formulated by Leon Festinger in 1954. Human beings determine their own value not through internal metrics, but through comparison with others. You are not rich or poor in absolute terms. You are rich or poor relative to whoever your reference group is. You are not attractive or unattractive. You are positioned on a spectrum against whoever the algorithm has decided to show you. In every era before this one, your comparison group was limited to your village, your community, your social circle. The natural psychological ceiling on envy and inadequacy was geography. The algorithm obliterated that ceiling. It replaced your village with a curated gallery of the most aspirational, most aesthetically optimized, most wealth-signaling humans on Earth. And it refreshes that gallery every 30 seconds. It turned the ancient mechanism of social comparison into a weapon pointed directly at your self-concept, and it fires that weapon at you hundreds of times a day. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that you should never compare your inner life to another man's outer performance. He was fighting the same war with fewer casualties. Cosimo de' Medici, the architect of Florentine power in the 15th century, never let rivals define his ambition. He set his own metrics, operated on his own timeline, and expanded his dominion in silence. The man who controls his own comparison group controls his own hunger. The cold action. Identify the 3 accounts you follow that most consistently make you feel inadequate, restless, or envious. Do not unfollow them. Study them. Ask exactly which psychological button they press and why you allow that button to be pressed. Then decide, with your sovereign mind, not your reactive one, whether that input serves your actual purpose or only their algorithm. But comparison is only the first weapon. The second goes deeper, far deeper. Phase 3. The platform has replaced your boredom with a system that prevents you from ever thinking. You are still here? Good. the fragile ones already left. Boredom is not a flaw. Boredom is the condition under which original thought becomes possible. Every artist, philosopher, strategist, and architect of power in human history required long stretches of cognitive silence to produce anything of consequence. Machiavelli wrote The Prince while exiled, stripped of title, tortured, and politically erased, in conditions of enforced silence and stillness. In that void, one of the most consequential political texts in human history was born.
The algorithm cannot monetize your silence. It cannot extract value from your stillness. So it has made boredom psychologically unbearable. Researchers at the University of Virginia conducted a study in which participants were placed alone in a room with a single option: endure their thoughts or administer a mild electric shock to themselves. The majority chose the shock. Most people now find their own minds more uncomfortable than pain. This was not an accident of human nature. This was cultivated. The notification, the infinite scroll, the autoplay. These are surgical instruments designed to ensure you never reach the cognitive depth at which your own ideas emerge. They want you always at the surface, processing, reacting, never creating. Because the man who creates is dangerous. The man who only consumes is profitable. Julius Caesar, before his greatest campaigns, spent long nights in silence with maps and manuscripts. Not scrolling, thinking. The distance between a Caesar and the average man is not intelligence. It is the willingness to sit in the discomfort of an unoccupied mind. The cold action. Sit in a room for 30 minutes with no device, no music, no input of any kind. Do not meditate. Do not practice anything. Simply sit and let your mind produce whatever it produces. Do this for 5 consecutive days and record what surfaces. What you find there is the thing the algorithm has been burying. Phase 4. The platform has not just captured your attention, it has monetized your outrage and made you a soldier in a war you did not choose. 99% of people who consider themselves politically aware, culturally engaged, morally serious, they are not thinking. They are reacting. There is a profound difference. The psychological mechanism is called moral outrage hijacking, a concept studied extensively by researchers at Yale, who found that algorithms consistently amplified morally outrageous content because it generated the highest engagement rates. The platform is not a mirror of what humanity believes. It is an amplifier of what humanity, at its most reactive and least reflective, momentarily feels. You did not choose your outrage. It was selected for you, based on what kept you clicking. Your political anger, your cultural anxieties, your sense of embattled identity, these were cultivated assets. They made you easier to predict, easier to monetize, and, critically, easier to control. King Philip IV of France understood that the most powerful weapon against an enemy is not force. It is the manufactured crisis. In 1307, he orchestrated the simultaneous arrest of thousands of Knights Templar across Europe, not because they were a military threat, but because controlled outrage was the instrument through which he seized their assets and eliminated their power. He manufactured the moral panic. He directed the crowd. And the crowd, inflamed and certain of its righteousness, did the work for him. The algorithm is King Philip, and your feed is the crowd. The cold action.
The next time you feel sudden, intense political or moral outrage from something you saw online, pause. Ask, who benefits from me feeling this right now? Who gains from my attention moving in this direction? The answer will not always be sinister, but asking the question is the act of a sovereign mind. Not asking it is the behavior of a managed asset. Phase 5. You have been sold a version of yourself that requires constant external validation to feel real. This is the culmination. Every prior mechanism, the identity engineering, the social comparison, the elimination of silence, the manufactured outrage, all of it feeds this final architecture. A self that cannot exist without the feed. Psychologists call this external locus of control, a concept developed by Julian Rotter in 1954. The individual with an external locus of control believes his worth, his reality, his sense of progress and value is determined by forces outside him, by the response of others, by metrics, by approval. The individual with an internal locus of control constructs his reality from the inside out. The platform has spent 2 decades systematically destroying internal locus of control. The like is the most elegant weapon ever deployed against human psychological sovereignty. It converted self-expression into performance. It converted identity into a product. It created a generation of men who do not know who they are unless someone tells them.
Galileo was placed under house arrest for the final years of his life. His work was banned. His name was politically erased. He continued his scientific work in confinement, pursuing truth not because the crowd validated him, but because he had an internal architecture that required no external witness. He did not post. He did not perform. He simply built. The cold action. Create something this week. Write, design, plan, build, and share it with no one. No caption, no post, no metric. Experience the act of creation entirely for its own sake, and notice how unfamiliar that feeling is. That unfamiliarity is the measure of how much you have been captured. Comment below. I create for no one. Now I am going to tell you something they will not. This path is cold. The man who reclaims his desire from the algorithm does not become happier in the way the feed promises happiness. He becomes quieter, more deliberate, capable of longer silences. He will find that many of his previous relationships were built on shared reactivity, on mutual outrage, mutual distraction, mutual performance. When he steps off the stage, some of those relationships will not survive. He becomes, in a certain sense, an exile. Not geographically, psychologically. He exists alongside the crowd without being of the crowd. He watches the machine operate without being operated by it. And that distance, that cold, clear distance, is sometimes lonely in a way that has no language. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in exile. Stripped of his office in Florence, subjected to torture on the rack under false accusation of conspiracy, politically destroyed at 43 years old. He sat in a farmhouse and wrote the most ruthlessly honest analysis of power the Western world had ever seen. Not because someone validated him, not because the algorithm surfaced his content, because he had something no platform can manufacture, a mind that belonged entirely to himself. This freedom is cold. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you the warm numbness of belonging to the crowd. It will require you to sit in rooms where your own thoughts are the only company,
and to find that company sufficient. But it is the only freedom that is truly yours. Every other kind is a subscription you did not sign. You reached the end. That is not a small thing. Most people could not sit with this for 12 minutes without reaching for the exit. The fact that you are still here means something. Not about your worth, which requires no external confirmation, but about the direction you are pointed. You already know what to do. You have known it longer than you have been willing to admit. Subscribe not because I asked you to. Subscribe because you are done being managed, because you are ready to build a mind the machine cannot touch.
What I cannot say in the open feed, the deeper architecture, the specific cold protocols, the real history of power that the algorithm buries because it does not serve engagement, that lives behind the wall. For the ones who are serious, the ones who are ready to do the actual work. The sovereign does not ask for permission to exist. He builds in silence and emerges when the fortress is complete. You know where to find me.